This is EntreEd Talk, the podcast for entrepreneurial educators by entrepreneurial educators. We are your hosts, Toi Hirschman and
Amber Ravenscroft. This podcast is created by the National Consortium for Entrepreneurship Education, or EntreEd for short.
Hello and welcome back to EntreEd Talk. We are super excited today to have our friend Nicholas Haber with us. Nich is an experienced executive entrepreneur and community builder whose business success has been based substantially in the setting of standards and measuring abilities of digital literacy and entrepreneurial skills. I cannot wait to unpack that. He has spoken at conferences on 4 continents, including having been an invited speaker at the APEC High-Level Dialogue on Human Resource Development in the Digital Age in Hanoi in Vietnam in 2017. Nich and his brother John created SkillCheck Inc., an online skill assessment company that started by measuring people's abilities with Microsoft Office and grew to create a library of over 800 knowledge, skill, and ability tests in a dozen languages. Nich and his team at SkillCheck used the experience they had gained from employers to build the IC3 digital literacy certification. Over 5 million IC3 exams have been delivered to date through the Certiport Test Center channel. And Nich joined Certiport in July of 2013 as the director of STEM and CTE. In 2016, Nich oversaw the development of Certiport's new Entrepreneurship and Small Business Certification, or ESB. The ESB certification launched in 2017 and has already been delivered to over 10,000 students. In addition to all of his work in measurement, Nich created the Distance Project, a community-based track and field Olympic development program for distance runners. Distance places post-collegiate track athletes in housing in challenged communities where they start cross-country and track programs in urban public middle schools. How cool is that? Distance was featured in the September 2012 issue of Running Times. Wow. So that's a lot of stuff.
Yeah. Well, are we done?
So
is that it? Have we run out of time?
That's it. That's the podcast. So this is so cool. And I cannot wait to talk about all of the stuff that you're doing. But before we dive into that, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your own entrepreneurial journey and how you got to where you are today? And also welcome and thank you for being here, Nich. We're so
Thanks,
excited.
Toi. Thanks, Amber. It's great to be here. And it was great to see you at the EntreEd conference in Kentucky.
It was really fun.
That was just a great conference. So how did I get here, right? So I consider myself an entrepreneur, but I'm not the kind of entrepreneur where I had this is what I want to be, right? This is where I want to go and I'm going to focus on, this role. I had no idea that the position I'm in now existed when I sought out in the work world. So all I knew when I got out of college is that I didn't want to do what I studied in college. And so I just, got out of college, was kind of lost. My brother had just come back from trying to be a freelance journalist in the UK and owed a bunch of money to our parents. And so started temping, right? This was back in the day when there were 11 different word processors on the market. That sort of shows how old I am. But my brother had the great idea, why don't we write a book that showed you how to use all different 11 word processors, and we'd sell that to temp agencies. So he had identified a problem, created a product to meet it, and we started selling to this very good market at the time. And we did what entrepreneurs do is we listened to our customers. We built really good relationships with them, started asking what did they really want. And the more we talked to them, the more we realized they wanted testing. And so we turned the company from a book publisher into a testing company. And that turned to be really successful. We won business with Manpower and with Echo Services, which is now Adecco. And actually these days, if you go into a Manpower office, they're still using the tests we built to SkillCheck. And so that really started my journey. It's been really exciting ever since, just getting into the whole world of testing and learning about, how to do that product, make a product that is valid and works, and, really learn all the aspects of running a business.
What did you study in college?
Biology. And I had a minor in German. I was not pre-med. I was really interested in genetics. I kept joking that my goal was to create a pet that was not just cute and cuddly, but could hold all of your toys. But the reality of working in a lab just did not agree with my personality. I'm a people person. I like hanging out with people and talking with people, and spending a lot of lab time with amoebae was just not what I wanted to do with the rest of my life.
There's not really riveting convo.
No, they kind of keep to themselves.
I really liked what you said. Toi and we do this all the time. So like you'll say something, we have this framework of questions, but we'll go down rabbit holes. But I really like what you said about how you didn't even know that your title existed, because we talk about that all the time, that like the students of today won't know what titles or types of jobs they'll have. So I think that's really important as like a frame for some of the conversations we have down the road in this podcast interview, because that's really important to us as an entrepreneurial education initiative.
Absolutely. No, I mean, the jobs are changing. Technology is changing so fast. If we stick to our existing models, we're not going to be prepared for the future of work. I mean, we really need to focus on entrepreneurial mindsets and trying to promote curiosity. And that's how we're going to solve the problems we're in.
Awesome. Yeah. We could listen to you talk about that all day. But we do want to go over kind of like how you came to be at Certiport, your role in the company, and it's like overall its role in testing and education, because we're really excited to have a company like Certiport represented on EntreEd Talk. So do you want to unpack that a little bit?
When I was at SkillCheck, we got approached by an organization to build some exams for their digital literacy certification program. It was a European organization. And we started working with them and realized pretty quickly that the business model they had was not functional. And so, sort of fast. And we realized that we had the capability of building really top quality exams, but what we were missing was the channel to deliver them and the ability to handle large transactions in a certification space, right? We were used to selling to big companies, and then the big companies would deliver those exams internally. When you go to shift over to like a certification where you're selling to individuals or selling to schools, and you need to manage all of those credentials, that was something we clearly didn't have. And so we looked around for a partner we could work with. And Certiport jumped out, and they heard about what we were doing, and they were really excited. And so we worked together to try and meet the needs of this European program. But it came to the two of us, it became really clear quickly that it wasn't a business model that would work for us. So we decided to create actually a competing product to what they had. And we launched the IC3 Digital Literacy Certification. This is way back in the early 2000s. And that was actually Certiport's second product. So the first one was Microsoft Office Specialist, which is still a very strong program. They were interested in diversifying, and this was a really good fit with what they did. And so we built that. We delivered it, they delivered it, we wrote it, we partnered with them together, and it was a good partnership. So that's how I got to know Certiport. And, back in 2006, we decided to sell SkillCheck, and ended up selling it to a company out of Florida called First Advantage. And so I ended up working for that company for 5 years after we sold. But kept the relationship with Certiport going. So in 2013, they came and said, we're interested in really putting a bigger emphasis on IC3 again. Would you come on board and help us out? And I thought, hey, this is really cool. I really enjoyed working with Certiport. It's a great team. So that's when I jumped on board.
I love that. We talk so much about how collaboration in this space is often sometimes people think of entrepreneurship as an isolated thing, but more often than not, when we have interviews, the thing that happens is the collaboration leads to that. So
I think success is really, there's a big part of entrepreneurship education is about self-assessment and understanding what you're about. And so it's really important to know what you're good at and what you're not good at, and really be self-aware, and because you should really focus on doing what your strength is and finding somebody else who's good at doing the things you're not so good at.
That's why Amber and I get along, because she's good at so many things that I'm not good at.
We make a good team, Toi. We make a good team.
This is so fascinating to me, Nich. You know, especially more than anybody probably, that what in education, what gets measured gets, looked at, gets taken care of. I mean, that's a big part, especially in formal education in K through 20 or whatever, even workforce. You have to have a way to measure things. We talk about this on a lot of our podcasts, like it's very difficult to measure entrepreneurship. And so you created the ESB to fill, that's a big need because we have these entrepreneurial programs and they're usually not part of standards, the standards that we all know about and love. So there has to be a way to measure that. So can you talk about the ESB exam and how that kind of came to be? And I have a little bit of insider knowledge because I got to review some of the test questions once upon a time when you were going through this. But if you could tell us about that would be really interesting to see how
Yeah. So you're totally right about how in education, you are what you measure. I kind of have a personal motto that I probably should get translated into Latin because it'll make me sound even cooler.
And on a t-shirt.
Yeah. Or like a big medal, right? But it's, measure what's important. If you don't measure what's important, then whatever is measurable will become important, right? And so we, Certiport, we've got a great research team here at Certiport, and they were interviewing our customers about what new certifications they wanted, what are the areas of teaching they wanted to do. And they came to us and said they're really interested in teaching entrepreneurship, interested in teaching business skills, that their students wanted to learn how to run a business, the teachers wanted to teach it, the communities where they live in. I mean, when you look in, I think you probably saw that Kaufman report a few years ago that says all net new jobs come from firms that are 5 years old or younger. So if communities want jobs in their in their cities, they need new businesses starting up. But the way a lot of schools get measured is based on, especially in career and technical education, CTE schools, you are measured, your funding comes directly from how many industry recognized certifications your students achieve. And so they were coming to us and saying, we really want to teach these skills, but there's no industry recognized certification for it. So because there's nothing acceptable to measure, we are being forced to find the closest thing we can find to a business skills certification. And that was Microsoft Office, which it's a great certification, and it's also good for Certiport because we deliver that program. But it wasn't what the students wanted, it wasn't what the teachers wanted, it wasn't what the community wanted. So, and we heard this enough from our customers that we decided to go and build one. And so we started that in 2016.
That's really interesting to us because when we are trying to assess our America's Entrepreneurial Schools program, and when we're writing grants, it's always like we have to be kind of tricky about how are we going to measure this. And so it's fascinating that we now have an industry recognized certification in entrepreneurship, but it's still hard to wrap my brain around that.
Oh, it's a weird idea, right?
You know what I mean?
Yeah, because you think of a certification, right? A traditional certification is I'm going to get this piece of paper that shows that I know how to do a job, and I'm going to bring it to a potential employer, right? And that potential employer will put me on the top of the stack because I've got these validated skills. But if you want to be an entrepreneur, like, what are you going to do? You're going to take this certificate to yourself right? That's a weird thing. And so that's why I think that's why there hadn't been a product like this in the past. But what, the role of industry recognized certifications has changed in our educational system. We're pushing more industry recognized certifications into schools. Schools are being asked and being measured themselves on the numbers of industry recognized certifications that get achieved. And so the whole idea of an industry recognized certification has changed. And that opened up this opportunity for us to create an industry recognized certification on entrepreneurship. So the direct thing is we're helping schools get the funding they need, and other training centers get the funding they need by demonstrating measurable achievement for their students.
I have such strong opinions on that. Like, I love that it's something that's created because I understand that the systems that are in place with education require it. But I just get annoyed that there are systems that exist that we need that. Like, I think it's a wonderful tool because the systems are in place that require us having industry recognized assessments and showing growth. But like, entrepreneurship's so vague. So it's so crazy to me, the whole thing. But maybe what kind of things, and you don't have to, this is probably private or confidential, but what kind of things does the ESB measure? Like,
it's not private at all, right? So you can go right to the Certiport website, and go to Certiport, CERTIPORT.com/ESB. We have a list of 6 major domains that we cover with the program, and I'll just go through them. So
yeah, that would be really helpful, I think, for everybody listening, because people are always looking for these kind of tools, always in this space.
Yeah. So, what does it mean to be an entrepreneur? So meaning, can you self-assess? What do you think about risk? And then there's the second one is opportunity recognition, right? How do you understand what an opportunity is and how that could be turned into a business? So the first 2, those cover more sort of entrepreneurial mindset areas. And then the last 4 are more kind of operational, starting and running a business. So you've got starting a business, how do you register? How do you identify your startup costs? The 4th domain is business operations, right? So HR, what can you do yourself? What do you need to get partners to help you with? Basic IP, intellectual property issues, taxes, how to build a sustainability plan. A 5th domain is marketing and sales, right? Developing a sales strategy, and how do you define a successful sale? How do you define the cost benefits of finding customers, things like that. And then the last bit is just financial management. So cash flow, your basic lemonade stand stuff, right? Fixed and variable costs, pricing, that sort of thing. So we're covering, 6 main areas within the ESB, and those are spelled out in more detail on the Certiport website.
Yeah, so definitely if you're listening, check that out. And I love that because we often recommend that progression anyway. Start with the mindset, then move into the meat of entrepreneurship. So I feel like ESB is really aligned to kind of what EntreEd uplifts in terms of integration into the classroom. So yeah.
I mean, it's hard. I sat in on some of the conversations too, but I mean, it's hard to develop something, especially around the mindset piece, but there's a lot of open-ended sort of case study kinds of questions that are really good that get to that mindset, because it's like, how do you test mindset? It's very complicated.
Yeah, and there's 2 elements of that. So, we're building a certification here, so it needs to be a pass-fail, right? So you can't have questions like, are you an introvert or an extrovert, right? Because there's, both introverts and extroverts can be successful entrepreneurs. So it's really more about, understanding what it means to be an entrepreneur. And then, I think based on a lot of experience we've had in building exams, valid exams, and especially coming from the IT space, the correlation between scenario-driven exam questions and real life experiences is high. So we're not just asking jargon questions or definitions. We're trying to put the exam taker into a real world environment and having them react to that. And I think that's one of the reasons why the program has been accepted as much as it has been.
It's
really,
vital.
It has to measure the things that someone's going to face in real life as an entrepreneur, as a small business owner.
Yeah, I think that there's definitely a critical need for that, and it sounds like it's gaining in popularity like crazy. It's going like hotcakes.
It is, yeah. It's growing faster than we had anticipated, and we had high hopes for this. We hit our year-end goals on September 30th.
Awesome.
So I was really excited about that. And just seeing some of the success stories around the country, around the world that we're hearing about it is just more exciting than I even anticipated.
And I think that's such a demonstration of the growth of entrepreneurship education as a whole. I mean, it's it's definitely where a lot of schools are kind of moving in that route. And so I think that's really a great example of how that's been affecting the overall education landscape if you're seeing that much growth that quickly.
Yeah. And it's, I think, I gave a talk in North Carolina at a CTE conference, and one of the teachers got up at the end and said, I use this in my, this certification in my class, and 3 of her students were able to take their certification and use it to get college credit at the school that they're matriculating to.
Oh, that's awesome.
And I mean, the biggest excitement I have is I'm going to Europe next week. I'm going to be in Helsinki because one of our customers, the University of Alexandria in Egypt, has been nominated as one of 2 finalists to win the Entrepreneurship Award from the European Training Foundation. And so they are flying in the president of the university to celebrate their implementation of ESB. The University of Alexandria has decided to make it mandatory for all 160,000 of their students. So it's
wild.
Yeah. So, I didn't see that coming, but it's making a huge difference. And, they're looking at Egypt saying, we've got 800,000 people, young people coming out of school and into the workforce. Mm-hmm. And traditionally, a majority of them would go into government, into the army. And that's just not sustainable. They need to build new businesses that can build the jobs that's going to sustain that population. And so they're looking to push entrepreneurship, and they're using ESB as a way to promote it and teach it and measure it.
I just graduated from Penn's Master's in Education Entrepreneurship, and one of my cohort members was a gentleman from Egypt who was launching his own online course, similar to like a Coursera model, but for skills training for Egyptian youth. Because of that exact problem, they're graduating massive amounts of college graduates, but with very little opportunity for them to go into existing workplaces. That's so interesting. I'll have to send him and see if he knows about that.
He's probably using the ESB.
Right.
I hope so.
I'm going to have to connect with him, because that's so interesting that that's something that they're really striving to do. And I can see that the relevant, just from hearing his pitch about why his stuff's necessary. I think that's awesome.
Yeah, I think a lot of people see entrepreneurship as a big solution to a lot of different problems, right? We bake into entrepreneurship is you're the teaching people how to solve problems, and then entrepreneurship itself is solving, entrepreneurship education is solving a lot of problems. And you look at these emerging markets where the youth population is booming. And they're going to need to figure out what jobs are available and how to run businesses that can take care of the people in their own communities.
And it's just important, we think that it's, whether you start a business or not, we truly believe that those skill sets and those mindsets are unbelievably important, and something that we should be teaching from kindergarten, pre-K even on up.
In the womb.
In the womb. I mean, if you look at kids, like kids naturally, when they begin school, they naturally have some of those mindsets. They're starting to bud, and then what do? We squash them. As education, we just go, nope, that's too free thinking. We can't do that. So it gets sucked out of them, and we need, we're seeing this big resurgence of getting the entrepreneurship into the schools, and more CTE, and it's that CTE stigma is kind of starting to go away a little bit, which is really, really nice. I was a CTE administrator, and there were kids that wouldn't come to my school because they didn't want to, that was like the bus, you get on the bus,
Right.
And we're starting to see that's changing, and these kids are starting to figure out that the skills they learn in CTE are just as valuable, maybe more than, the ones that they're learning in the traditional setting. But it's so cool. I'm so glad that you're on today, because I know that there's a lot of our listeners that kind of struggle with this, because we're educators, we're teachers, we have to have a test. And so this is really filling a need where there was a great need. So you probably passed that opportunity recognition portion of your test. You probably did well on that.
I think I did okay on that. Yeah. But I do want to talk a little bit more about testing. And, I think testing gets a bad rap. There's, I don't like bad tests, right? There's some of the issues where, people are being held accountable, and nobody likes that. But everything needs to get measured these days, right? You talk about funding agencies for anything, whether it's a private foundation or whether it's government funding, they want to know, like, what's their money going towards? And if you're going to be funding infrastructure, it's really easy to tell, right? You go, I paid for these roads, I paid for these bridges. After I spent the money, I go over and I look, where are these roads? Or there's a road, or there's a bridge, it looks good, I'm good. All right, great. If you're going to invest in education, what do you do? Like, too many, how do you measure that? And so we're coming in saying, this is a way to measure achievement and learning. We're saying that entrepreneurship is a teachable and learnable skill. And this is a way for someone to demonstrate that they, students have achieved it. It's, we really struggled to make sure that this was the appropriate level, not just, not everybody's going to pass it, but it is achievable during a secondary school year. So I think that's a big thing. And I kind of think, like, the world is, I think of the world and the employer market as being like a big symphony, right? You need everybody, you need people to play violins and cellos and flutes and bassoons and saxophones and what have you. You can't have everybody coming in and ask them to play the violin, right? To apply for the job by playing the violin. Right. Yeah, sure. Most of the symphony is violins, but you need the whole symphony. And so I think we need these, different testing instruments that are going to measure the different things that we need in our communities.
You're absolutely right about that. We need good tests.
Yes, I really like what you said there. We need tests that actually test things.
Actually are measuring something that we care. And I think that, like you said, testing's gotten such a bad rap because of all of the debacle around the standardized tests and issues that happen with those. And, it's a tough industry.
Yeah, so we're about to go down a rabbit hole here.
Yeah, I know. I heard that sigh. I was like, oh gosh, here we go.
Well, in that case, let's switch gears a little bit, because I just learned about this the other day at our conference when we were talking, Nich, that tell us about any distance. And it's NE, like the letter N and the letter E. I guess, is that New England? Is that what
New England distance? Yeah, okay. Exactly. Yeah.
But tell us about this, because this is really cool and not something I knew at all about you. So
Yeah, I'm fascinated.
Yeah. So, my job is great. I love what I do. But I realize I work remotely. Certiport's offices are in Utah. So I'm living here in Providence, Rhode Island. My boss is in Minnesota. My customers are all around the world. I live my life online, right? And so I wanted to do something that connected me with the place that I lived. And I run. So I like to run, my whole social scene is pretty much made up of runners. And in 2012, I realized that 6 Providence residents were going to be in the London Olympics in track and field. Like, this is so cool. Like, why isn't everybody writing all these stories about it? I mean, Rhode Island's really punching above its weight in terms of these things. And at the time, there was a start of a movement to have distance runners start to run on teams. They have been running individually, trying to train as sprinters, and it didn't work. Like, we really haven't been, we haven't gotten a lot of quality runners on Team USA teams because everybody was trying to run on their own. And the realization is you need to do this together. And the other thing that I found out about was that the urban schools in my area, so Woonsocket is a mill town just north of Providence, they had cut all of their middle school sports because of budget issues in 2009. So this was a really strong community, really proud of their sports, but it was not an affluent town, and so they cut the middle school sports, and then all of a sudden they had no feeder program, and so these kids were finally getting to high school, getting an opportunity to play sports, and realizing that they were competing against kids in more affluent communities who've been doing it for 2 or 3 years. And so it was just another, blow against the morale. And so I found these kind of 2 different communities. One is these elite runners that are looking to continue to run after college. When they leave college, all of their resources get pulled out from under them. And then there were these kids that did not have an opportunity to play sports at all. So we merged those 2 groups, and we created what we call an athlete in resident fellowship program. So we recruit post-collegiate track athletes, and we put them up in an apartment. And I've got friends here that volunteered to coach them. So we've got Kurt Benninger, who's the husband of Olympian Molly Huddle, who's our head coach. We've got Bob Rothenberg, who was the head coach. He's the retired head coach of Brown University, has so many HEPS titles at Brown. So they helped out. And so the athletes come in, they get all these resources, they get coaching, they get housing, they get a stipend to travel to meets. But in exchange for that, they get matched with middle school, and they coach kids in cross country and track. And so this is our 8th year doing it. We've had 3 kids win individual gold medals in the state championships. And I've had 5 of my elite athletes make 4 Team USA teams.
Wow.
So I love that. This is so inspiring. I love that idea. I mean, I would not personally run, but I love people that do.
Well, it was interesting because, again, it was looking out at what other people are doing and learning and asking a lot of questions and trying to do that. So there was a really awesome community development company in Woonsocket called NeighborWorks Blackstone River Valley that had just opened this really awesome place called the C3 Center. Don't ask me what C3 stands for, but it's 3 things that start with the letter C. And
makes sense.
But they renovated this old mill building, and people could live upstairs for free if they spent 16 hours a week tutoring kids after school. I'm like, that's awesome. Like, that's I want to do that, but I want to do that with runners. And so it wasn't an original idea. It was just seeing what other really smart people were doing and adapting it to a new area.
That's so, I mean, the whole dynamic of it is so fascinating, because we had an employee at Adventure that was a runner and had the same experience where she graduated college and then lost all those resources. And I could see her immediately like honing in on this kind of opportunity. And at the same time, the loss of middle school athletic programs is, I mean, that happens. So it's like a social good. It's just a very dynamic business model. I like it.
So cool.
Thanks. Yeah, it's been a lot of fun. And, you know, getting to see these kids just, and the parents will have parties where one of our elite athletes is competing in a meet, and we'll go to the local pub, and like the parents bring their kids and we watch the race. So there's just a lot of back and forth about it. And it's, you know, it's really great because the kids get inspired by these athletes, and the athletes, you know, love giving back. And it just works.
That's so cool. I'd love to see that in action. I'm gonna have to come up to.
Yeah, no, come on up. Yeah,
I love Rhode Island.
Show up in Providence.
I'll go for a run with you, but I'm only good for one run, and then body parts start to fall off. Yeah,
so we'll keep it short. Yeah, and I'll bring a bag.
I'll be at the end. I'll just fix it.
I love running, but as the older I get, the harder things just don't. These things just don't run like they used to.
Yeah.
Literally. So I think we're approaching our time, but we've unpacked a lot. We've talked about a lot. So what do you view as like your next, like what are you most excited about coming up in the future?
Well,
in all aspects of life, anything you want to talk about.
Yeah. Well, next week going to this award ceremony in Helsinki is like
so neat.
Huge. I mean, it's so exciting. Yeah. It just sort of culminates a lot of what I've been, the whole company has been spending a lot of time trying to get to happen. We're now seeing this happen, and it's pretty rare that like that comes together with like a big awards ceremony and a dinner, right? So that's pretty cool. But there's, we're keeping the business going. The business is growing. We're looking at more certifications, right? We just launched a program, Apple's app development with Swift is a big one that we just launched last year. We're trying to get more. That's a whole world of new jobs, right? There's a million people that are impacted by the app economy. And so we're getting out there saying in clear language, this is what you need to know, and this is how you can demonstrate achievement. And then, I'm out there looking for more opportunities, more certifications out there. I've got 3 I'm looking at now, hope to bring on 2 of them. Can't tell you what they are, but when we get them, I'll let you know.
That's the confidential piece. We can't hear those. Okay.
Yeah, but that's what I'm trying to keep these big programs going, and but also looking to add more and try to have the same impact on other areas of the workforce and education.
A true entrepreneur and entrepreneur.
Wow, that's so neat, Nich. I'm amazed at all the stuff that you're doing. That's so cool. But I guess we have to say goodbye for now. Until next time.
Until next time. But, I hope I'm going to see you before the next EntreEd conference. But
I think you will, because I'm going to come up and have a run.
Yeah.
So why don't you tell our listeners how they could connect with you, whether it's LinkedIn, Twitter, what's the best way to connect with you if they want to find out more information?
Yeah, so definitely go to the website, the Certiport website, CERTIPORT.com, and you'll see the whole catalog of certifications we have, including the ESB, Entrepreneurship and Small Business Certification. If you want to get in touch with me, my Twitter handle is Nich, N-I-C-H, Haber, H-A-B-E-R, so at Nich Haber. You can find me on LinkedIn and all your favorite social media stuff. We're all on everything these days, but I'll respond by connect with me on Twitter is probably a good way to get in touch with me.
Awesome. Well, thank you again so much for being here. We've loved having you.
Keep doing what you're doing. I mean, what you're doing promoting entrepreneurship education is really important. And anybody's listening, if you don't have the EntreEd conference on your calendar for next year, go. It was completely inspirational. I learned a lot from the teachers that presented. I thought it was a really great conference. And I think anybody that's interested in ESB should go to this conference to learn, from other teachers how to teach entrepreneurship.
Thank you. That was not sponsored content.
Yes,
folks.
thank you.
Pretty organic.
I'll send you your check in the mail.
But we appreciate you so much. And this has been just a great conversation. And we're so excited to continue collaborating with you and your team. So thank you.
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Nich.
Take care, Toi. Take care, Amber. Bye.
Bye, everybody.